The fountain pen pierced through Victor's palm, black ink and red blood pooling on mahogany. Elias lay on the library floor, the locket resting against his chest, and learned that the woman he loved was his sister, or so his father claimed. He stared at the gun beneath the desk, wondering if this was how it all ended, if the Vance legacy truly consumed everyone it touched. 13 hours earlier, the evening had begun with champagne. Elias sat at a round table covered in white linen, his silver fork hovering over a plate of duck confit. The candlelight was warm, almost forgiving, but his eyes were fixed on Clara's hand resting on the tablecloth, on the diamond ring catching light like a small star. The sparkling was beautiful. It was also a cage, though he didn't know it yet. The restaurant was called the Gilded Rose. It existed in that expensive space where old money moved quietly between tables, where the piano music never overwhelmed conversation, where people came to celebrate the things that would later destroy them. Elias and Clara had been engaged for 3 weeks. This dinner was supposed to be perfect. "You're doing it again, Elias. You're somewhere else." Clara's voice came from across the table, soft and concerned. She wore a blue dress that matched her eyes. She had always worn blue. He wondered now if even that had been calculated. He dropped the fork. It hit the china with a sharp ting that made nearby diners glance over. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his palm already beginning to sweat despite the cool air of the restaurant. He forced a smile, though his jaw remained tense. "Just thinking about the guest list," he said, the lie easy on his tongue because it was partially true. "Family, it's complicated." Clara was about to respond when the heavy oak doors of the restaurant swung inward with a violence that didn't belong there. Cold air rushed in from the street. The piano music faltered for a moment, then resumed as if the interruption had been nothing. Victor Vance stood in the doorway, wearing a charcoal wool overcoat. His leather gloves were still on, despite the warmth of the restaurant. He scanned the room with the efficiency of a hunter, spotted his son immediately, and began walking toward them with a stiff, military-like gait. His shoes, expensive Italian leather, clicked rhythmically against the polished floor. Other diners watched him pass. People always watched Victor. Elias stood up so abruptly that his chair scraped loudly backward, a sound like something tearing. His hands balled into fists at his sides. Next to him, Clara's face went pale as she looked between the two men, between Elias's rigid posture and Victor's approaching frame. "You didn't think a change of address would keep me away from seeing my successor's bride, did you?" Victor's voice was gravelly, tinged with mockery. It was the voice of a man who had spent decades making other people afraid. Victor reached out a gloved hand toward Clara. She hesitated, then allowed him to lift her hand from the table. He inspected the ring like a jeweler examining merchandise, his eyes squinting behind gold-rimmed glasses. The contrast was striking, the black leather of the glove against Clara's fair skin, the expensive stone against the expensive hand. "Too delicate," Victor said, his tone dismissive. "It looks like it would break under the slightest pressure, just like your mother's." He released Clara's hand and turned back to his son. Victor smiled, but it was the kind of smile that contained no warmth, only information. Then he walked out of the restaurant the same way he had walked in, his footsteps echoing, leaving behind him only cold air and the wreckage of what should have been a perfect evening. For a long moment, neither Elias nor Clara moved. The piano music continued. Somewhere behind them, someone laughed. But at their table, there was only silence, and the terrible understanding that some people carry their entire history with them, and when they walk into a room, Everyone inside that room becomes part of that history. Elias pushed his chair back further. He grabbed his jacket from the back of it. "I need to go," he said. Clara caught his wrist. "Elias!" But he was already moving, already following the wake his father had created through the restaurant, already on his way toward the street where the night was waiting. The kitchen exit was close. Elias pushed through the metal bar, and it clanged behind him with a sound like warning. He found Victor on the other side of the restaurant, standing under a single buzzing streetlight in the alley. His father was lighting a thin cigar, the flame from his silver lighter casting dancing shadows across his face. The air smelled of garbage and expensive tobacco, a combination that somehow smelled like money and decay at once. "Get out," Elias said. His voice was low, controlled by nothing except the effort required to keep it low. "If you go near her again, I'll bury you." Victor exhaled a cloud of gray smoke directly into his son's face. The cigar was clenched between his yellowing teeth. He stepped forward, entering Elias's personal space, heightening the tension through proximity alone. He had always known how to use space as a weapon. "You have the same look your grandfather had before he lost the company," Victor said. Weakness masked by a temper. Elias lunged. He grabbed Victor's lapels with both hands and slammed his father against the brick wall of the alley. The impact was violent. A loose brick chipped away and fell onto the pavement below. Elias's face was inches from Victor's, his teeth bared, his breath coming in ragged bursts. His hands pressed against the wool, against the body beneath it. And for a moment, he almost became the man he hated. Victor didn't fight back. Instead, he laughed, a dry, rattling sound that came from deep in his chest. He reached up and tapped Elias's cheek with a single gloved finger, the leather cold against his son's skin. And in that moment, in that terrible moment, Elias realized he was holding Victor exactly the way Victor used to hold his mother. The same grip, the same posture, the same violence waiting patiently underneath. "There he is," Victor said softly, with satisfaction. "My boy, I knew you'd find the blood in your veins eventually." Elias shoved him away and stumbled backward. His hands came down to his sides, and he wiped them against his trousers as if they were contaminated. He turned and ran toward his black SUV parked at the curb. He threw himself into the driver's seat, started the engine, and didn't look back. In the rearview mirror, he saw Victor standing under the streetlight, still smoking his cigar, watching his son disappear into the night with an expression of complete satisfaction. The SUV's taillights faded into red streaks against the darkness. That night, Elias didn't go home to Clara. He checked into a hotel under a false name. He sat in the dark room and tried not to think about anything. But thinking was all he could do. He thought about his mother. He thought about his father's hands. He thought about the diamond ring on Clara's finger and wondered when it had been placed there. When, not by whom, because he already knew by whom. The question was, had Clara known? Morning came too early, with gray light filtering through curtains that didn't quite close. Elias showered. He put on the clothes from the previous day because they were all he had. He checked his phone. 14 missed calls from Clara, 7 text messages, each one more desperate than the last. The newest one was from 20 minutes ago. "Elias, please, let me explain." Explain what? That she was a paid actress? That Victor had chosen her the way he chose everything in his son's life? That even love, that most private and supposedly authentic thing, was just another pawn in his father's chess game? Elias turned off the phone. He walked to Central Bank. He used his key to access his mother's safe deposit box. He had been meaning to visit it for months. Now, finally, he had a reason. The viewing room was small and windowless. Fluorescent lights hummed above him. A heavy gray steel box sat on the table. His brass key fit into the lock perfectly. The lock clicked. The lid lifted. Inside was a stack of old letters tied with a blue silk ribbon, and beneath them, a manila envelope labeled "For Elias. When the cycle repeats." His hands began to shake as he opened the envelope. Inside was a document titled Conditional Trust Agreement. He read the first page, then the second. His fingers stopped at an underlined clause regarding his marriage. The text was clear. The inheritance shall be released only if the heir marries a candidate approved by the trustee to ensure the preservation of the Vance legacy. Attached to the back of the document was a photograph. It showed Clara at a charity gala taken 3 years ago. She was smiling, completely unaware that she was being catalogued like an object, assessed and approved and placed into a system designed to control and contain. She was chosen, Elias whispered to the empty room. He picked her. He folded the paper and stuffed it into his pocket. He looked at his reflection in the polished steel of the box and saw his father looking back at him. He went back to his apartment. Clara wasn't there. He stood in the center of their modern living room and looked at the framed photo of the two of them on the mantel. He couldn't look at it for long. He started moving through the room, opening drawers in the teak sideboard. He found nothing. He moved to the bedroom, the bathroom, the kitchen. He was searching for something he didn't know how to name. Evidence, proof, a reason. Clara's iPad was on the coffee table. He tried her birthday as the password, 0314, but it was locked. He tried the date they met, 0922, and it unlocked. His hands were shaking as he opened the email app and searched for Victor and Vance. The screen displayed no results. The absence of correspondence should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like accusation. It felt like a lie. Elias was still holding the iPad when Clara emerged from the bedroom wearing a white robe, her hair damp from a shower, a towel draped over her shoulders. She stopped when she saw him, and her expression shifted from surprise to hurt to something else entirely. Something like betrayal. "Are you checking my messages?" Her voice was trembling. "After last night, I thought we'd talk, not this." Elias tossed the iPad onto the sofa. It landed with a soft thump on the leather. He stood up, his shadow looming over her. He pointed toward the window, toward the city where Victor's office tower stood, a glass monument to accumulated power. "How did you really meet me, Clara?" His voice was harsh, accusatory, carrying all the violence that lived inside him. "Was it accidentally at that gallery? Or did my father give you a script?" Clara's jaw dropped. Her hand flew to the diamond ring on her finger, as if checking that it was still there, as if checking that the life she had been building was still real. She looked at him like he was a stranger. "You think I'm a paid chess piece?" Her voice cracked. "Your father has poisoned your mind so much you can't even see me." She turned and walked back to the bedroom. She closed the door. Elias heard the lock click. He left the apartment. He drove to the parking garage where he kept his SUV. He needed to move, to do something, to feel something other than the terrible grinding in his chest. He was crossing toward his car when 2 men emerged from behind a concrete pillar. They were wearing tactical black jackets. One held a heavy flashlight. The other had his hands visible, fingers ready. "Mr. Vance wants to ensure you don't miss dinner at the estate tonight," the first man said, his voice flat and mechanical, a voice trained to deliver threats without emotion. "No more tantrums." Elias didn't think. He swung his leather briefcase. It struck the first man across the face with a sound like a bat connecting with something solid. The man's head bowed, blood spraying onto the driver's side window of the SUV. Elias kicked the second man's knee. The man grunted and twisted sideways. His sunglasses flew off and hit the concrete, shattering into pieces. The second man recovered quickly. He grabbed Elias's arm and twisted it behind his back with professional efficiency. Elias felt his shoulder pop. A terrible sound, a terrible sensation. Pain blossomed across his entire upper body. The first man wiped blood from his mouth. He drew a retractable baton with a metallic snick. Elias was pinned. The baton was out. The end was probably in sight. He drove his heel down into the second man's foot and rammed the back of his head upward into the man's nose. He felt the cartilage break. Blood poured down the man's face. He released Elias. Elias spun, but the first man was already swinging. The baton connected with his ribs. The pain was immediate and absolute. Elias doubled over, clutching his side, gasping. The two men positioned themselves to resume the attack, but Elias was moving before they could. He scrambled toward his car, limping, bleeding slightly from a cut above his eye. He threw himself into the driver's seat and locked the doors just as a heavy boot kicked the window. The glass didn't break, but it spiderwebbed. Elias threw the car into reverse. Tires screeched. He blasted out of the garage, accelerating into the gray afternoon, leaving the two men in the rearview mirror. He could see them running after him, could see their frustration at being left behind. He drove without direction. Somewhere, his phone was vibrating. He could hear it, but he didn't answer. He drove through the city, watching buildings pass, watching people move through their ordinary lives, watching the world continue as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The person he loved had been selected by the person he hated. His entire life was a construct. The walls of his reality were collapsing. Night came. The city lights reflected off the wet streets. Elias parked 2 blocks away from his father's estate and approached on foot, keeping to the shadows. He knew the layout of the house. He had grown up in it. The side window was still broken, had been broken for years, never repaired because Victor didn't repair things. He simply allowed them to remain broken and called it character. He climbed through. The house was dark, filled with the sound of his own breathing and the distant hum of the security system. He moved through the darkened library, his ribs bandaged beneath a dark hoodie. Medical tape held everything in place, created the illusion of stability. He reached Victor's mahogany desk and used a pocket knife to jimmy open the bottom drawer. Inside was a leather-bound ledger. He opened it to the current year. There were lists of names. Clara's name appeared multiple times, next to dollar amounts. $50,000, $75,000, $100,000. Each entry a payment, each payment a confirmation. Elias flipped backward through the years. The names changed, but the pattern remained consistent. Women brought in. Money transferred. The system perpetuating itself across decades. He flipped back further, moving through time. And then he found it. His mother's name, Martha. Next to it, in the same handwriting, was an entry from 30 years ago. Recruitment fee, paid in full to Martha's father. It goes back, Elias whispered. It goes all the way back. He turned the page and found photographs clipped to the entries. His mother and father on their wedding day. But his mother was crying. Victor was holding her arm with the same grip that Elias had used in the alley. The same violence, the same control masquerading as commitment. The library lights flooded on. Victor was standing in the doorway, holding a glass of scotch. The ice clinked softly. He didn't look surprised. He looked disappointed, the way a person looks when a student has failed them in some fundamental way. "History isn't a book you read, Elias," Victor said, stepping into the room. "It's a cage you live in. You just found the lock." Victor walked to the desk and set the Scotch glass down on a silver coaster. The sound was deliberate, precise. He pulled a tablet from his pocket and slid it across the desk toward Elias. The screen glowed. It showed a live feed of Clara's apartment. In the grainy black and white video, Clara was sleeping. "She's a lovely girl," Victor said. His voice was calm, almost conversational. "It would be a shame if she shared your mother's fragile ending." Elias slammed his hands onto the desk, leaning forward. He stared at the screen, then at his father. On the desk, beside Victor's hand, was a syringe. It was the same kind of medication his mother had used. The clear liquid inside it caught the light and held it. "You killed her," Elias said. His voice didn't sound like his own. "You didn't just recruit her, you ended her." Victor picked up the syringe and looked at it with an almost nostalgic expression. He stepped toward Elias, gesturing to the camera feed again. He pointed out a second figure in the corner of the screen, a man standing in Clara's hallway, in the shadows, just out of focus. The man's presence was a threat. The threat was everything. "Loyalty is the only thing that keeps people safe in this family," Victor said. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "You sign the trust, you marry the girl, and the accidents stop." Elias looked at the pen on the desk. It was a gold fountain pen, expensive and ornate. It looked like it had been designed specifically for signing away one's life. He realized he had no phone, no help, no way out. Victor's men were everywhere. They were in Clara's apartment. They were in the parking garage. They were embedded in every system, every structure, every part of his world. The crushing weight in his chest made it difficult to breathe. Elias picked up the pen. His hand was shaking so hard that the nib scratched against the paper without leaving a mark. The scratching sound was the sound of his resistance, minimal and ineffective. Victor smiled. A thin, cruel line that contained complete victory. "Sign it," Victor said. "For her sake." Elias was about to put pen to paper when he remembered his mother's letters. He had seen them tied with the blue silk ribbon. He hadn't read them. But the simple fact of their existence meant something. It meant his mother had tried to leave a message. It meant there was something beneath the surface of the system, something authentic and real that his father had tried to control but couldn't completely destroy. It gave him just enough. Elias stabbed the fountain pen into Victor's hand. The gold nib pierced through skin and tissue and into the palm beneath. Victor screamed. It was a visceral sound, filled with shock and pain, and the realization that his son had actually done something irreversible. Blood pooled around the nib. A guard burst through the library door, drawing a handgun with practiced efficiency. Elias dived behind a heavy leather armchair as the guard fired. The bullet shattered a crystal decanter of brandy on the desk. Glass and liquor exploded. Elias tipped the armchair over, using it as a shield as he charged the guard. They collided and fell onto a rolling library ladder. The ladder slid across its metal tracks with a terrible grinding sound. Bookshelves came down. Books fell like hail, hitting the floor in their bodies. Elias grabbed a heavy hardback and slammed it into the guard's throat. The guard gasped and clutched his neck, his fingers scrabbling at his own skin. Elias wrestled the gun away, but the guard kicked him in the stomach, sending him reeling back toward the desk. Pain erupted in Elias's abdomen, right where his ribs were already damaged. Everything hurt. Victor approached, his hand wrapped in a bloody handkerchief. He picked up the syringe from the desk. The needle glinted in the light. The guard pinned Elias's legs. Victor loomed over him, the syringe descending. "You were always going to be just like her," Victor said. Quiet, fragile, forgotten. The needle was inches from Elias's neck when Victor stopped. He pulled out a small locket from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a tiny photograph of a baby. Elias could see the birthmark on the baby's shoulder, the same one Clara had. The locket was pressed toward him like evidence, like proof. "Why do you think I chose her?" Victor asked. His voice was tender, almost paternal. "Why do you think she looks so much like the Vances?" Elias's eyes widened. He looked at the photo again, at the baby's face, at the familiar shape of it. His stomach turned over. The ultimate betrayal materialized in that moment, became real in a way that physical violence could never achieve. She's my sister?" The words came out broken, barely forming. Victor laughed. It was a cold, echoing sound that filled the library. He stood up, looking down at his son with complete satisfaction. He felt he had won, that he had successfully broken Elias's spirit in a way that would allow him to control it forever. He dropped the locket onto Elias's chest. "The Vance blood must stay within the Vance line," Victor said. His voice contained something between obsession and madness. "We don't marry out. We iterate." Elias lay on the floor, the world spinning. The realization that his love was a manufactured sin, that he had been engineered to repeat his father's crimes, made breathing feel like an unnecessary action. He looked at the guard's gun lying just out of reach under the desk. The metal glinted in the light. It would be simple. It would be relief. He closed his eyes. He saw Clara's face, then his mother's. He realized they were all just ghosts in Victor's machine, caught in a cycle that only had power if you believed in the ghosts, only if you accepted the cage. Elias's fingers began to twitch. He remembered his mother's letters, the real ones, the ones that had been preserved in a safe deposit box for decades, waiting for him to find them. His mother had left them for a reason. She had believed in something beyond Victor's reality. She had believed that escape was possible, that authenticity was possible, that there was something real worth fighting for, even after everything had been revealed as constructed and false. Elias grabbed the guard's gun from under the desk and fired a shot into the floor near the guard's head as a distraction. The gunshot echoed through the library. Dust and splinters exploded upward. Elias kicked Victor in his injured hand and bolted for the door. He slammed the heavy library doors shut and slid a metal trophy through the handles, locking them from the outside. Behind him, he heard Victor shouting orders. He reached the grand staircase. 2 more guards appeared at the bottom, moving into position. Elias didn't slow down. He vaulted over the banister, landing on a large velvet tapestry hanging on the wall. The cloth tore slightly as he slid down it, the friction burning his palms. He hit the floor, rolled, and sprinted for the kitchen. He grabbed a set of car keys from the staff hook by the door. The kitchen exit was open. He burst out into the rainy night. Water pounded down, soaking through his hoodie, washing blood and dust from his face. The rain was cold. The rain was real. Elias jumped into a silver Mercedes parked in the staff lot. He hot-wired it with a dexterity he didn't know he possessed. The engine roared to life. He floored the accelerator and drove toward the gate. The ornamental iron bars shattered under the weight and speed of the car. Sparks flew, metal screamed. And then he was through. Driving away from the estate, away from the estate's lights, away from everything his father had built. He drove to Clara's apartment. Rain streaked the windshield. The wipers fought against it. The city blurred past. He drove faster than was safe, but safety seemed irrelevant now. Everything that had mattered had been destroyed. Everything that remained was just what he did next. Her voice turned sharp, cold, protective. He thought it would make me leave you. He didn't know I found his ledger first. She pulled a file from under the sofa cushions. It was a DNA report. She held it up for Elias to see. The results showed scent kinship between her and any Vance family member. The percentage was underlined multiple times in red. The stock photos were delivered from a photography service in Prague, Clara continued. The DNA test I ordered 3 days ago. I used your bathroom trash to get a sample for comparison. Your father is a liar, Elias. He's been lying so long he thinks lies are hereditary. Elias sank to his knees. He buried his face in Clara's lap. She stroked his hair with one hand and pulled out a phone with the other. She dialed a number. She waited. Then she spoke clearly into the phone. I'd like to report a crime. My name is Clara Vance. I'm calling about Victor Vance. No, I'll wait. The police arrived 45 minutes later. They took statements. They examined the safe deposit box documents. They reviewed the ledger. They contacted other women. They found patterns. They found crimes stretching back decades. By dawn, the machinery of justice was in motion. Slow and grinding and imperfect, but actual. The estate grounds looked different in the pale pink light of sunrise. Victor was led out of his mansion in handcuffs. The charcoal coat that had once looked imposing now just looked dusty and stained. He looked old. He looked small. The police cars had their blue and red lights flashing. The lights reflected off the mansion's windows. A few neighbors had come out to watch. The neighborhood that had existed in the shadow of the Vance house for so long was witnessing its fall. Elias and Clara stood by the gate. Elias held the Conditional Trust document in his hands. The paper was thin and creased from being stuffed in his pocket. He struck a match. The flame was small but bright. He touched it to the corner of the paper. The fire caught quickly. The flames were bright in the morning light, bright yellow and orange, bright with the specific brightness of things being destroyed. The ash blew away in the breeze, becoming less and less substantial, until there was nothing left except memory. Clara took off the diamond engagement ring. She looked at it for a moment, turning it so the light caught the stone. Then she dropped it into the sewer drain by the curb. The ring fell. It hit something hard. Then it fell again into the water below. It disappeared completely. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a simple silver band. She slid it onto her finger. The silver was thin and plain and unmarked by any history except her own purchase of it. I bought this myself, she said. No legacy attached. Elias took her hand. Their fingers interlaced perfectly. They turned their backs on the mansion and started walking toward the city center. The police tape remained behind them. The ruins remained behind them. Their footsteps echoed on the pavement. Their shadows lengthened in front of them. The morning was cool and clean, the kind of morning that felt like it contained only itself and nothing else. They walked past the ornamental roses that grew along the mansion's boundary. One of the flowers had bloomed early, a deep red bloom that seemed to glow in the morning light. A petal fell from it, a single petal, and landed on the scattered ashes of the trust document. The red petal on the gray ash was almost beautiful. It was almost like an ending that contained something genuine. Let's go home, Elias said as they kept walking. Our home. They didn't look back again.